Hello, welcome to this edition of Palmdale City Library Supports the Arts, Building Bridges. Very happy to welcome you. The plan and intent is that, again, we will post this pre-recorded program on the library's YouTube channel in the month of July. And I want to make you aware, if you're not aware, that by the time this posts, the library is already back to our pre-COVID full service hours for the public, and we'll be gradually reintroducing in-person programs here at the library. Please always feel free to contact us by phone, come by, or check our website at www.cityofpalmdale.org/library. Look forward to seeing you in the library as we get back to pre-COVID library business. Our regular hours, just want to mention those again, are Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., Friday and Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., and then on Sunday from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. For today's program, we're again very happy to have Jesse Davidson here as our facilitator and special guest Laura Hemenway. I'm going to say a few things about Jesse and Laura. First, I want to again introduce Jamie Lee Beck, the assistant director for the library, and wearer of many hats, and walker on water, things like that. Yes. Jesse, if you're not aware, was born and raised in the Antelope Valley and has been a bassist since his early teens. He's been involved in local music scene since 2010, working professionally in Southern California since 2012. His resume includes working at the Lancaster Performing Arts Series, teching for Last in Line, Lita Ford, Venice, among others, and touring as an independent musician with Reverend Red and Rogue. In August 28th, he began writing for the Valley Press, covering local music, and his weekly column releases each week in the Showcase section. So be sure and check out his column in the AV Press. And today, our special guest is Laura Hemenway, and a little bit that I've learned about Laura, and I look forward to hearing you myself here today, Laura, is that she is passionate about that she likes to access creativity, her own and others, through art, music, and writing. And that is certainly what this program is about. And she says that her her personal mission includes accessing other people's creativity via songwriting, all ages, all genres. So that's just a little teaser about Laura. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jesse.
Well, thank you, Robert. I appreciate it. So, the theme of today, as all of these lectures have a theme, it is something that Laura sent in some information about, sent us a bio about herself and, a little bit about her background. And basically, the theme of today is creativity is a natural human trait. And I was not fortunate enough to take Laura's class at Antelope Valley College that she taught for many years, which was the songwriting class. But many friends of mine have, and she's among the what I would like to call a great lineage of educators that have been in the Antelope Valley. People like Lee Madelon, various band directors in the valley. She's a part of that through Antelope Valley College and has taught generations of students about music and songwriting. And I think the my favorite thing about Laura is that she has the ability to bring out somebody's gift of creativity, and that could be through music, songwriting, art, through just not only her nature but also just her methodology through teaching. So today will be more of an interview as opposed to a just straightforward lecture series. And so, Laura, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And so, just to give people a little bit of background about you, can you kind of talk about how you started teaching at Antelope Valley College and your history with education, just to get this started?
Well, um, I guess you could say that job at Antelope Valley College was my lifelong dream at age 27 coming to true fruition because you know I was a generalist as a musician growing up. I was in orchestra, I was in band, I took ballet lessons. I was on stage in community theater. I was that kind of a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my main focus was piano. So all of my training had to do with learning how to read music, other people's music,
Yes.
and how to perform other people's music, and how to teach that skill to other people. So, when I graduated from high school, having been a marching band member, an orchestra member, a choir member in high school, I went to Ventura Community College, and I kind of got a calling to teach on the community college level, because back then everything was free.
Yeah.
You didn't have to, I think we had to buy our books. Yeah, we had to buy our books, but there wasn't any tuition or anything like that. And my parents couldn't have afforded to send me to university for 4 years. So 2 years of college music majoring with an excellent faculty enabled me to be able to transfer to UCSB as a junior, because I passed all my entrance exams. And I just, even at that age, I thought, this is so great that somebody with financial difficulties can get their first 2 years of education for free. So that's when I kind of got the idea in my head, I really want to teach at the community college level. And so when I got to UCSB, I majored in piano. I got my BA in piano. But way back in 7th grade,
Mm-hmm.
I won the student conducting competition,
Oh, that's
and
great.
that was when I realized I can stand in front of a bunch of people. At that time, it was 12, 13-year-olds, and make sense of what is on this page and turn it into music. And that was in my head the whole time. So once I got my bachelor's degree at UCSB, I auditioned for the conducting program,
Yeah.
for the master's program, and I was accepted. There were two. The conducting teacher always took two students. I got to be one of them, so which meant I was in front of an orchestra once a week for 2 years.
Yeah.
So I had really good training at UCSB. Then, this was way before the internet. I started looking for jobs, and the first one I applied for was out in the desert where I'd never been.
Mm-hmm.
It was in August, because the former teacher at Antelope Valley College had gotten a job late in the year, and so I drove out there where you are,
Yep.
never having seen a Joshua tree in my life, and took my interviews, and I got the job. And it was a small department, still is,
Yeah.
but really small then. I mean, there were two full-time people. Um, my position was instrumental music, and the other position was choral music. That was Glenn Horsepool at the time. This
Mm-hmm.
was 1978.
Wow.
And my teaching load included um, music theory, piano, fundamentals of music, woodwind ensemble, sight singing, orchestra, and band.
Wow.
All of those things, and I was happy as could be, because that's, I'm a generalist, and that's what brought me to the Antelope Valley. And I think that was your question.
Yeah. No,
I
that
don't
was just
remember.
well, no, just to give people, I forget sometimes just because, I've known before I met you, I've known about you through musicians in my social circle within the Valley because they took your songwriting class and they were part of the music program at Antelope Valley College. And then, of course, when I went through that same program later on, you weren't teaching there anymore, but, people talked about you a lot. And so when I finally got to meet you, I understood what, what people were talking about. And I think it's, the impact that you had on my peers, at the time who were still attending AVC or had attended and were in our musician social circle was really impactful because they had nothing but positive things to say about your teaching process and the experience that they had in your various classes. And so I wanted to give people a little bit of background about, how long you taught at AVC and, sort of how you came to the Valley. And I think it's interesting you call yourself a generalist because it's one of those things where I think now people want to focus on a specialty so much, but like you being able to uh, cover a wide variety of areas in music is really helpful and was able to actually get you that sort of teaching position. So I think that that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, my backstory is kind of long, but it's because I'm old.
I was going to say that's a wealth of experience that you have to pass on to your students. So that's that's important. So with teaching all these different classes, you've sort of, I think, can kind of study where a lot of different young people are coming from. So you're getting people from all different walks of life coming through Antelope Valley College, and you're observing, what everybody's process is like, what everybody's background is, and sort of how all these students think. And doing that for decades, you really have an idea of how innate, creativity is as a human trait. So I guess my next question would be, you know, how specifically would you define that with creativity being a human trait? Because it is something that you have to practice and work on, and it is a craft, but there is something uh, innately inherent about creativity, and that I think we all, have music in us. We all hear music. We can all hum something right now if we wanted to. We could all, there's phrases that come to mind that we could write down, and that could be a part of a story. So there's all these little bits of creativity that happen spontaneously. And is it more of a craft or a discipline? Where's the line between it being natural and being something that's developed and practiced?
I think it's a great question. And in my own experience, I honestly thought I was incapable of creative thought.
Mm-hmm.
My mission on earth was to teach people how to do, what Mozart did.
Yeah.
And when I was on the podium to recreate this Beethoven score. But at one point in the 90s, kind of late 90s, I started becoming not disenchanted with the dead guys, if you know what I mean. Um,
Right. Right.
but just like, what about what about our own creativity? What is it that we can access ourselves this time around on the planet? And
Yeah.
and that's why that old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. This book fell into my hands, and it was this book called The Artist's Way by
Hmm.
Julia Cameron. And I still maintain, for any kind of artist, whether you're a musician or um, a visual artist or a
Mm-hmm.
writer or just anyone, if you use her techniques, she's got two of them, and I used them. I ended up using them for the songwriting class, which I kind of inherited once Glenn Horspool
Mm-hmm.
retired. And when I took over the commercial music program back in the mid '90s, um, the curriculum was mine to look at and figure out what I wanted to teach.
Right.
And I had just been exposed to this book, The Artist's Way,
Mm-hmm.
and the two techniques are mainly, the huge one is, when you wake up in the morning, roll out of bed, open up a notebook, and write 3 pages
Yeah.
of anything,
Yeah.
literally anything, and then close it. And you never have to go back to it.
Yeah.
You never have to edit it. Just do it.
Yeah.
So, and I thought, this is just, I was 40 at the time, 40-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, this is just, I don't know about this. This seems really weird, but I'm going to try
Mm-hmm.
it. And then her other instruction, which isn't as important in my experience, but she feels it is to take yourself on an artist date once a week.
Okay.
which means, head over to the art gallery and just walk around. Just take yourself to um, out on a walk by
Yeah.
yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever you would do with a person that you valued, take yourself on that date. So, but the 3 pages were key for me, and so I started doing it, and I never would have believed this in a million years, because
Yeah.
maybe 2 or 3 weeks into this, the choreographer at AVC, the dance teacher at the time was Kathy Bingham,
Mm-hmm.
who started the yoga program over there
Oh, okay.
years ago. But she was choreographing shows at the time, and I'd worked with her a lot. She came to me and she said, I have an idea for a ballet, and I want you to write the music for it. And I went, Kathy, I can't do that. I don't know. I'm incapable of creative thought. That was my mantra. I would tell people this.
Wow.
Now I can
Yeah.
recreate other people's stuff, but I don't write music. No, you can. It's based on this book. And I said, right. She says, it's going to be a children's ballet. Anyway, she showed me the book, and all of a sudden, I know this is going to sound crazy, but
Yeah.
music started coming into my head when I
Mm-hmm.
saw this book, and it was called The Rainbow Goblins. So anyway, it's a really cool book, and the guy that actually wrote the book and did the paintings for it is the guy that did the storyboards for Neverending Story. I don't know if you know that movie, that sort of
I've
fantasy
heard of it.
movie.
Yeah, heard of it. Haven't seen it.
I think you dig it. It's sort of a fantasy movie. It's kind of old, but anyway, this guy
Yeah.
did the storyboards for it. So
Wow.
so anyway, long story short, I started writing music. Some of it was just based on illustrations in the book. Some of it I would go to the dance studio over in the gym, and she would have choreographed some movements for the color red,
Wow.
for the color green, and there would be like a dancer
Mm-hmm.
portraying those colors. And I would just look at the movement and go, okay, I can hear music going with that. And I would have my it was called the W5 synthesizer
Yeah.
by Yamaha at the time. And a few months later, this 40-minute ballet was born. We performed it for a week at the LPAC. Um,
Wow.
we bussed in kids from schools all over the Antelope Valley, filled it, 758 seats, 2 performances a day
Yeah.
for a week.
Wow.
My music that I wrote,
Yeah.
all because I think, because I was doing morning pages every day.
Mm-hmm.
This weird thing happened in my mind. And it was kind of a revelation to me. I truly thought, look, if somebody like me, who truly feels I can't create anything
Right.
except copy,
Yeah.
um, can do this, I wonder what I could do for my students. So that's
Yeah.
about the time that I was revising the curriculum for commercial music. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to try this in songwriting and see
Yeah.
what happens.
Yeah.
So all these people show up in the songwriting class in the fall. And the thing that's so cool about community colleges, and why it's so relevant to your agenda for this
Mm-hmm.
series, Jesse,
Yeah.
is that we've got every age, we've got
Yep.
every walk of life at the community college. And I had everyone in that class, from high school students who were taking it because they were really smart, and they were just about done and they were only sophomores,
Mm-hmm.
um, to you know to legitimately aged community college students,
Mm-hmm.
to moms, to um, I mean, every walk of life,
Yeah.
veterans. Oh, wow, what valuable stuff those guys brought to the table. And
Mm-hmm.
I put together this sort of agenda for every class meeting, kind of based on the Julia Cameron principles. And it worked, and stuff started coming out that was great. But the main thing that everybody had to do in order to get an A in the class was to write morning pages.
Yeah.
And some people were very resistant to that. But
Yeah.
the ones that did it, like the guy you interviewed last month, Ian McCarter, who
Yeah.
did it religiously, you know.
Yes.
I mean, his morning pages were legendary.
Yeah.
I would go, you know, to his station, and here his notebook was filled out, you know, 21 pages for the week.
Yeah.
And I, you know, and I probably embarrassed him, but I would like show it to everybody. It's like, look, you guys, this is what he did. And then at the
Yeah.
end of class, everyone had an opportunity to present um, any kind of music that they'd created that week. And Ian would always get up and write and perform some song that, you know, everybody would go, what?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, oh,
Yeah.
you're so talented. And it was his first opportunity to write songs. He'd never done it.
Yeah.
And no one believed it. You know, and of
Yeah.
course he is blessed with a beautiful voice.
Yes.
The way he sings is pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But he hadn't even really played guitar before at that time.
Right.
He had played some mandolin, but not guitar. And so, you know, he's kind of like the perfect example. But to whatever degree anyone participated in that 3 pages of morning pages, um, they were the most successful if they just did that.
Yeah. No, and wow, with all of that you brought up, it's there's a lot of stuff that's not only happening in my own life at the moment with doing my own version of morning pages, every day, but it's and with you referencing Ian, I was just thinking about that as you were talking about this, knowing that Ian was one of your former students. Uh it really goes to show you that we are a lot more capable than we give ourselves credit for. And the point is not to be worried about if you're going to make a mistake. It's about consistently doing something every day, even in little increments, like 3 pages a day, or even if stripped it back to a page a day. That's still better than doing nothing, than, with this kind of stuff. And I think, beyond all that, it shows you that, like, you had this conception about yourself that you didn't think you were capable of creative thought, which is insane to me to hear that. But I understand it because I have my own versions of that of, oh, I don't think I can do this, and fill in the blank with whatever that could be. And, the fact that you realized your own ability and then passed it on to Ian, who has since passed that on to other people, is such an incredible gift to put out into the community.
And he's not the only one. I mean, he's just
Mm-hmm.
like he's an example, because
Yes.
he's so focused on, you know, what his dreams are for himself and for his future family, and
Yep.
looking into the future. um, that he's a great example. But you know,
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many people that walked through that class that showed up saying, I can't, I can't, I can't. And if you can just get that out of, you know, get yourself out of the way,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, so that, you know, that Julia Cameron book really did it for me. It's not the only
Absolutely.
thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I had all of a sudden other mentors started showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Another one was, at that time, I took a class at UCLA in
Mm-hmm.
writing,
Okay.
and this couple taught it. And it was kind of the same idea. Everyone in the class would write something, um, basically kind of the way you would write to a title as a songwriter, you
Yeah.
know.
Mm-hmm.
We'd get a topic thrown out, and everyone would write something about it. And then we would come to the class and we read it to everyone. And these teachers, it was a couple, my husband and wife, um, their philosophy was no negative reinforcement.
Yeah.
Afterwards, we're all gonna applaud, and then we're going to go around the class and everyone's going to say what they liked about what they heard.
Yeah.
And that's what I did in the songwriting class. That also works and
Mm-hmm.
makes people less fearful about putting something on paper,
Yeah.
or recording something, or even the way their voice sounds when they sing.
Oh, yes.
Because
Yes.
come on, Bob Dylan, come on. you know.
Right, right. Well, and there's so many people like that too, that with that style of voice that you just mentioned, that their voice fits their music perfectly, and if you were to translate that into so many other situations, it would not work, but it works perfectly for what they're doing.
Yeah, and are they
Um,
telling a story, and are they
yes.
telling an interesting story, and are they holding your attention? Which is
Yes.
another reason why in my class, um, this also worked. Everyone had an opportunity to present 5 minutes of anything. They
Yeah.
could get up and talk about what they had for breakfast if they wanted to.
Mhm.
They'd be on a timer, but most songs get a message across in 5 minutes. So that's another skill that's learned. How many open mics have you been to, Jesse, where somebody gets up and they sort of, my guitar's not really in tune and it's a really lousy instrument and I have a cold and I'm not going to sound good, and all
Oh,
the all
oh
the all
man.
the disclaimers start, and then you're 3 minutes into them standing up there and the host is going to cut them off. And they haven't had
Yeah.
a chime to, they haven't had a chance to tell their story. What a shame, and
Yeah,
it's,
no, yeah, exactly.
we're
It's
all so fearful of sharing um, who we are and a story.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And that was whether it's an open mic night or I've seen that at shows too. If a band feels like they're not well rehearsed, it's like, oh, well, we just learned this song a few days ago and, it's not going to be great. And it's like, well, then you're giving people a preconception about this already. Whereas if you just did it, and even if you didn't go into it confidently and you just went, all right, here's the next one, whatever, and then just left it neutral, you'd be a lot better than if you're not just telling the audience that, you're telling yourself that, and that's a big thing with creativity that could be tricky at first. But that was actually going to be my next question, is that with all the different types of students you've encountered, different backgrounds, like I mentioned earlier, and as you mentioned, I think fear is a through line through all of that you probably encountered in many students, and that crossed all sorts of different boundaries. And whether it's just, I don't like the sound of my own voice, like I can't stand listening to it because of however you think it sounds. I don't want to hear my songs back, or I don't want to get up and play in front of people because everybody's going to be looking at me. That manifests in all sorts of different ways, right? So, what are some techniques aside from what you already mentioned that you've used to get people out of their shell? Because obviously it doesn't happen overnight. That it's with your class especially, a lot of people would take that multiple semesters. So you're seeing people developing over the course of literally it could be a couple years, and you see where the change starts and then how that takes place through when they left your class. So what are some ways that you were able to get people to overcome that fear and get them out of their shell?
Well, I think I just have to say, to begin with, sometimes it just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you
Right.
you aren't. Sometimes I wasn't successful.
Sure.
And that always made me sad. But I gave it a shot. But
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the main things is if the group is small, which by virtue of the fact we did it in the piano classroom, so there were 20 pianos in there. So
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes the class would be packed. Um, because word had gotten around that it was a cool class. But when
Mm-hmm.
people realized the degree to which they had to be responsible to themselves, it always leveled out to be about 20 people. So if you get a group of 20 people together um, in a room for 3 hours a week for the space of a semester, and cultivate a sense of community,
Mm.
it just happens, because there are going to be leaders immediately that rise to the occasion that say, "Oh yeah, I get what this is about," and they always get up and present 5 minutes of whatever, and they're fearless about it and say, "Look, this week I came up with lyrics. Check these out," or "This
Yes.
week I came up with a tune. Check that out."
Mm-hmm.
um, and they're getting approval from everyone because at the end of their 5 minutes they always get applause. There's this encouraging, nurturing kind of vibe that it just isn't. isn't sympathetic to someone who wants to come in and put themselves down
Right.
for 5 minutes or
Right.
or even share at all,
Yeah.
because it is an atmosphere of inclusion, and everyone is welcome to participate, you
Yeah.
know. And I think one of the things that kind of puzzled me, that was a failure on my part,
Hmm.
that I'm still grappling with, is, in order to get any kind of grade in the class, you had to do morning pages because I believed in it so much.
Yeah.
And I had one guy that never ever did it. And so, I never was able to pass him in the class.
Yeah.
He was the greatest rapper I've ever heard in my life.
Wow.
Elliot McJimson is his name. He
Hmm.
lives in Vegas now. Um, but he was in the class for 4 semesters. He didn't care about the grade. Yes,
Yeah.
because it isn't about the grade, for heaven's sakes. But he always just cheerfully accepted his D. Um, because he wouldn't do morning pages, but on the spot. You know, so he knew that he was included,
Yeah.
and he knew everyone approved of him, and so he kept coming back and sharing in his 5 minutes this incredible extemporaneous commentary that was
Yeah.
in rhythm, and all of us were mesmerized. So my method is flawed sometimes, but in general, I think the answer to your question is inclusion,
Yeah.
and a period of time to which you're devoting 3 hours a week with people that are creating a community. And my goodness, I mean, this group
Hmm.
never got sick of each other. They'd go out, to what,
Yeah.
Buffalo Wild Wings or whatever afterwards. They would be together
Yeah.
before the class. They'd say, let's meet at In and Out before class.
Yes.
They'd be out in the lobby hanging out on the break. They would bring me burgers. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
and this wasn't from day one, but I saw it happen over the space of a semester. And then,
Yes.
as you say, the real gift with that class is we're allowed to. I don't know if they're allowed to do it still, but we were allowed to offer it 4 times in a row.
Hmm.
So if you're a legitimate community college student, you go as a freshman first semester, second semester, as a sophomore first semester,
Yes.
second semester. So if you're able to do that class 4 times, and I always would require 4 songs a semester for
Hmm.
people to write, and that's 16 songs in 2 years. That's pretty good, you know.
That is really good.
If you
And
get one good one, you know.
yeah, that's a good ratio. 16 songs, and especially for a beginning songwriter, 16 songs in 2 years, and then if you end up, liking one of those and it's a really good one, then yeah, that's a huge accomplishment. And it's so funny you mentioned the hanging out and the Buffalo Wild Wings thing, because you also taught a performance class. I forget the actual name of the class, but it was basically a band that you could audition for, that was an ensemble that had the same sort of setup, that usually people would take it 4 times, and the band would stay fairly consistent, and it was called a Test Flight. And that's been at Antelope Valley College for many, many decades, and many students have passed through there, myself included. And it really, there were people left over from when you were after you had left Antelope Valley College, I think in 2009, if I had
That's
my information right.
very good. You have your information
Yeah,
right.
I remembered the plaque in the front when I was waiting for classes. There was a little plaque by one of the entrances to one of the music buildings.
Oh, the plaque was still there.
It was still there. It was still, well, I started in 2010 is when I
Okay.
started. Yeah,
The
so
year after I retired. Uh-huh.
that was right after high school for me, was that graduating, and then I was there for a couple of years, few years, doing performance classes, and the same thing, just going through the motions of all these different classes. But yeah, there was a sense of community that was carried on through that, because there were students that were still around from your classes that were there for 2009, from 2009 on, like I think 10, 11, 12, they were still taking classes there. And we would go, and after our performance class got done, Test Flight on Tuesday nights, we would hang out afterwards until 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. And those are some of my dear friends to this day, because we spent so much time hanging out together, because there was this sense of support there. And coming from a student's perspective as well, when I started taking those classes, I was going through my own life change and going through a hard time. And, it was one of those things that going to those classes not only got my mind off of things that were happening outside of class, but it was, I felt like a really supportive environment. So I could show up and play, bring in a song idea. And it was just nice to have, something like that that was supportive, in my life. And I know that there's a lot of students that probably felt the same way, after they got done with their program.
Yeah, we, just in terms of every performance class, my own philosophy is to try to foster community.
Yeah.
And the reason why is there are so many payoffs in the music business because, you know, you really have to bring um, your desire to create with your fellow musicians to the table. You're not going to get called to play gigs if you're a jerk.
Right. Right.
So my goal as a teacher of test flight, which I can't remember what that class was
I
called
think it
at the
was
time either.
popular instrumental performance, I think was the technical name, but that
Yeah,
was
it
that
had
was that
been
was only something like that. But that was, or a commercial music ensemble, something like that.
yeah, it had been through a bunch of different titles
Mhm.
just because of what was required
Yes.
from the state
Yes.
for things to be called
Mhm.
whatever. But
Right. Right.
we just wanted to what we were wanting to do was to create um, a lab kind of situation so that people got performance experience.
Right.
And I inherited that desire from my colleague Glenn Horspool because he's the guy that came up with the idea with the title test flight because
Yeah.
you're all in aerospace country out there.
Yes.
And I thought it was a really great idea. And the reason why, just a little history, is because back when he started the program in the uh, I'm going to say the mid 80s, yeah, there
Mhm.
still was this huge on Sierra Highway. There are all these hotels and motels,
Yes.
and they all had rooms where bands could play, and
Mhm.
they would hire bands.
Yes.
It wasn't about recorded music or house music or anything like that. Every hotel had a band.
Mhm.
And so these kids all wanted to be employed, and then the next step would be if they got to be, playing at the Desert Inn. That was a huge
Yes.
gig at the time.
Yes.
If they got the gig at the Desert Inn for a couple years, then maybe they could get a gig in Vegas because that was huge too. Antelope
Mhm.
Valley musicians heading to Vegas, and you'll find a lot of Antelope Valley musicians still in Vegas.
Oh
But
yeah.
but what Glenn Horsepool observed was that these kids would be going over to the Desert Inn and they wouldn't have any performance skills to speak of.
Mhm.
Their mic technique was a little lacking. Um, they wouldn't have scoped out the venue ahead of time, and so they'd be setting up way past the time when they're supposed to be playing, and
Right.
just things like that. So just things like that were the things that we would address in test flight um, with with the with the students, that were in it, and that just creates camaraderie, And
Mhm.
like you say, when you're done with your rehearsal, you're winding up chords just like everyone else. If
Yep.
you're a singer,
Yep.
you've got tasks to do to help the
Mhm.
to help the sound engineer, and we're all in it together, and then you go to Buffalo Wild Wings.
Yeah, it's there's very limited places that are open to eat after about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. So it was
Yeah,
either
there's
there
always there's
or
always a place to go though. In our time, it would have been Caro's or Denny's or
that was another one. I think after my group sort of migrated out of test flight, I think the next group coming in always went to Denny's, and that was the place that they picked. So they carried on the tradition of hanging out afterwards, just in a different environment. But I think all of this is, and I've talked with this. The very last one that we just did, that'll be coming out at the end of June, is Trey Balfour
Oh,
teaching at Little Rock High School,
oh, cool,
and
cool.
even with Ian's and in this lecture, there is the overall goal of trying to take some of these principles that we are accustomed to as musicians, and in the artistic and creative scene of being respectful and being open-minded and accepting people and having all this stuff that we talked about, like trying to apply it to our community in whatever way that we can, because I think that it's something that unless you experience it and you live in it for a while, then you don't quite get it. And it's also in the sense of like, you can understand how all these things work, but when you feel it and experience it, it's like, wow, this is so joyful and this is so great. You want to have everybody kind of, be a part of that sort of ideal. So, I don't know. What are some ways that you think that in our community that we can sort of foster that same environment that you had in your class? Obviously, a class of 20 people versus, a community of 500,000 plus people or more is different. But I think that there's ways that we can translate that into our community, and I wanted to get your take on that.
Well, it's hard for me to make any kind of observation because I hang out with musicians all the time.
That's true. That's true.
But I don't know, maybe I bring that energy to the table whenever I walk down the street. Because there, and part of it, I think the pandemic helped us in a way in that
Mm-hmm.
regard, because you're not seeing anything, you're seeing eyes. And
Mm.
so your eyes have to convey so much without being able to see the rest of the face. And so when you're in the grocery store, just to look someone in the eye, that's kind of a skill that I grew up with, because my dad always said, look someone directly in the eye and then shake their hand firmly. Couldn't shake hands anymore, but just that kind of communication is,
Yeah.
that philosophy of my spirit greets your spirit. How you doing?
Yes. Yes.
You can't see my smile behind my mask, but it's in my eyes. So something just as basic as that. But having a helping nature rather than a constant desire to disagree, um,
Yes.
and a listening nature. These are just sort of basic human characteristics that I think then, rather than being judgmental of people, and this carries over to the whole songwriting
Mm-hmm.
creativity thing,
Yep.
is not just judging, man, I hate that guy's music, to,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
if you like it and I think you're cool, I guess I'll give it a chance. I
Yeah.
mean, it's coming from a creative spirit somewhere. And so that then hopefully makes you less judgmental of yourself and
Mhm.
makes you more open to creating something yourself and understanding the process, and therefore being more sympathetic to the whole creative process and what brought somebody to create something. um,
Right.
okay, it may be music you don't like, it may be art you don't understand, but somebody, a human, created it. So
Mhm.
give it a chance, and then you can always say, not for me. But
Yeah.
you know there's no sense in being so incredibly critical of it, because I know people literally who get up in the morning and they're critical of everything.
Yeah.
That's their day, and
Yeah.
that's not going to help you create anything.
No. It definitely, that's something that I've worked on in the last couple of years with last few years I should say, with my own creative process, to the point of, and going back to what you were talking about, just sort of putting those governors on your mind and what you think you're capable of, oh, well, I can't do that. Well, why? What farmer's almanac rule book are you reading that, oh, yes, it says here that you exactly can't do this? And no, that's not the case. And this sounds a little silly for me, but I'll share a little personal anecdote. For the longest time, I would not post any videos of me playing on social media at all. And like, if I was filmed at a show on a stage with a band, feeling like I had rehearsed and prepared for it, I would post a video of that, but would never put up a camera in front of just in a room playing, because I just didn't think like, oh, well, I'm clearly not good enough to do that. I'm good to be on a stage with other people, but I can't just play in front of people. And while I was just recently in Nashville on a sort of post-vaccine trip, I was at a buddy's place and he had a bass there. It was not my bass and wasn't set up the way I would like it, and had a little amp that, I need to have like, all sort of my sound, my proper sound dialed in and everything. All of these factors, and I hadn't played in, almost a week because, it was like with traveling out there. And I thought, well, what better time than now to, if I actually want to get over this sort of, limitation I'm putting on myself, what better way than to like have all of the conditions that I, think are not ideal to do this. And it seems really silly, but it was this thing of like, yeah, I'm not going to put limitations on myself anymore. And I think that comes through starting, doing things like, writing down stuff every day, morning pages. It comes from, just making little, increments every day to, sort of change things that you want to change about yourself. And exploring this through creativity is a great way to discover all of that about yourself.
Yeah, it really is. You're right. It is incremental, and sometimes it's hard to even trace when changes occur,
Mm-hmm.
but they do, and that's why, to me, this whole the morning pages idea is
Yeah.
so kind of magical, and I don't know why it works, but it does, and it does make you more forgiving of yourself, and therefore more fearless.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Yeah.
why not try it? It's like, we could get onto the whole subject of, why am I painting now? you know
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
because I can.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
but sometimes you have to have somebody sort of give you permission, and
Yeah.
if you see
Mm-hmm.
somebody else doing something that looks like it might be fun, why not try it?
Yes, absolutely. It's I think it's also removing those expectations on yourself, because if you sit down and you think everything is going to be a home run or a hit, and it's anything less than that, of like, I'm going to sit down to write something, paint something, whatever it is, a song, story, and it's going to be great. I think it's good to have that confidence in yourself, but I think just putting that expectation on it, then if it's okay or if it's good, then you're going to feel like it's not worth doing. Or if it doesn't get the reaction you expected, as far as like, oh, I'm going to do this, or I created this thing and I'm going to put it out there and people are going to love it. And then if people are like, yeah, that was pretty good, and you're like, what do you mean pretty good? I put my heart and soul into whatever this piece is. And I think if you can remove that expectation, and I think there's a quote that I read recently, and it's either the I Ching or the Tao Te Ching. I think it's a Eastern philosophy book.
Right.
It's talking about living. I think in the book it was described as living in innocence, because if you live in ambitions and expectation, then that's like just exercising your ego, and that's not going to get you the results that you want. And it's sort of in doing creativity for myself, and I say doing creativity and just summing up all of like my writing and music and everything, being involved in creativity, doing activities like that, you sort of strip those barriers away after a while, slowly over time, and then you just realize you just have to do the best you can and not worry about all of these different factors on it. You don't want to put any qualifiers on it. You just need to go for it.
Yeah, exactly. And you and I both know that when you sit down to write something, it can take a totally different turn from where you intended it to go.
Yes.
All of a
Yes.
sudden characters are showing up that you're going, who's this guy? And
Yeah.
it's like that happens in songwriting too, that it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I sat down to write the song about such and such, and then it turns into something totally different, and you got to kind of go, you can't have this argument with yourself as, no, I intended it to be this,
Yeah.
because it might turn out to be cooler if you go the other direction, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure you could say the same thing. The best reactions I've had to anything I've ever put out there are things that one, I didn't think would do that well for whatever it is, as far as just, and I mean well in the sense of, whoever, is in your social circle, whoever enjoys what you do creatively, you put something out there. It could be, for me, sometimes it's been articles I've written, and then other times it's been songs and other pieces I've written with bands. And it's, anytime where there hasn't been expectation on it, or not a lot of them, or you think, oh, well, this is just kind of, you know, this is just something I did, and you throw it out there, that's when you get the most compliments on, oh, wow, that was really good. And then you're always dumbfounded by that, because, it's
right.
sometimes what you consider to be just, oh, this is just something I did, almost like a throwaway thing. It could really resonate with somebody, and who's to say what's right and wrong with that.
Yeah, totally. You just have to trust the process and put it out there, and you know, if
Yeah.
if it's like you say, if it's something that resonates with people, that's what you're going for, you know?
Yes, exactly. I think that's a great point. And so, in summary, just sort of talking about, summing up all of the creative things we talked about, um what would you say is your own, um how should I put this? I guess, I don't know, your goals for, what you would like to see, what you would like to do teaching wise still, or if, mentoring, or if there's any other things on the horizon that you would still like to do, as far as, passing things on to a artistic community, or offering your talents and skills, just anything in that regard.
Yeah, that's tough because when you're retired, it's like all of a sudden your forum is gone.
Yeah.
And so, basically, I've just kind of been enjoying myself.
Hmm.
But one of the ways I enjoy myself is by teaching, and so I'm and then the pandemic hit. I I had before the pandemic, I had maybe 10 piano students that came to the house, and every level, mostly beginners, but different ages, adults
Hmm.
and kids. And I'd never taught kids before. So for me, that it was a challenge because I'd never taught privately
Yeah.
before. So that was fun. And then the pandemic hit, and immediately there were kids that were like, "Yeah, I'm all over it. Let's do FaceTime lessons." So I still have 5 students that I teach remotely, and that has worked out really well because for me as a teacher and as a communicator, I had to figure out ways of, okay, how am I going to do this without doing any kind of duet playing?
Yeah.
Because lots of times my favorite technique was, okay, you play the left hand, I play the right hand, and let's see what this sounds like together. You can't do that anymore because of the time delay.
Yeah.
So, just figuring out different techniques for teaching has been fun. Um, but as far as the creativity part of it, I guess that has yet to be figured out because I'm painting a lot.
Okay.
And I got that permission from our buddy Dan Byrne,
Mm. Yeah.
who, way back when the internet first started and people were having home pages,
Hmm.
um, he was one of the first guys that had a page with like his own web page that had not only samples of his music but his paintings. I'm going, what?
Yeah.
You can paint and compose music at the same time? So that's about the time that I started experimenting with painting. But when I retired, I really started doing it, and so I've got an Etsy store, and I'm selling paintings. And you never could have told me 20 years ago that I'd be doing that. But
Yeah.
as far as sharing it, I think it would be cool to take
Yeah.
um, these ideas that I used in songwriting and applying them to a painting class
Yeah.
or even a writing class. It's just finding the forum to do that. And, I mean, I've toyed with the idea of applying for let's go teach at the rec center, or let's go apply at City College, which actually I've done. But there just um, aren't opportunities to do that for me right
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
So, I kind of look around to see how I can be useful. And one way of doing that is, I still have all these relationships with students all the way back to 1978
Wow.
on the dreaded Facebook. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so fantastic to me that there's this couple that got together in test flight, Walker and Lindsay Gibson,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
who now have a 15-year-old, 14 or 15-year-old who's ready to audition for test flight.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
and it's just like freaking me out, so I
Yeah.
kind of feel like, well, in a way I'm still participating because I still am in touch with those guys, and
Yeah.
offer them encouragement. And their daughter is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
She's the stuff she's doing during pandemic. She did a whole performance of Hamilton, which
Mm-hmm.
she did the whole orchestration for. I mean, it's like, but anyway, I'm not answering your question.
Oh
But
no. That's actually perfect because you brought up. I wanted to talk about Dan Byrne a little bit before we headed out, but yeah, it's using the example of Walker Gibson and Lindsay, who Walker's a staple in the music community out here, in many ways, and is very talented and involved in so many different things out here. He's with shows I've worked at LPAC. I've seen him there doing community theater stuff with his wife and his daughter. He's played solo acoustic shows out here, shows with a full band, and very much a part of the music scene. And so again, we're going back to realizing your own potential, and then if you're not afraid to pass on your talents or share these with people, you could have all sorts of impact that you didn't necessarily plan on having before. Ian Walker, so many of your former students, many of whom I'm friends with, that comprise most of, my closer friends. And yeah, it's I think it's something that, because this creativity is a natural trait, people who are involved in these classes pick up on that, and people recognize the commonality in each other, and it all sort of ties in together. So it's very relevant. Yeah. And you also, with your creativity, would do things outside of classes, like for those that don't know, Dan Byrne is an accomplished singer songwriter, and wrote some songs. Roger Daltrey used one of his songs, Regent Street, in one of his albums, or two songs. Yeah.
I don't know what the other one is. I'm still trying to find out. But he had two of Dan's songs on his latest
Mm-hmm.
solo album, Regent
Yeah.
Street being one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And wrote songs for the John C. Reilly movie Walk Hard, that was a parody of all of the music biopics, and had some songs in that. And yeah, through Laura's friendship with Dan, she hosted a couple of house concerts in the Antelope Valley, where Dan would just come out here, and there would be a small little intimate setting, and Laura would invite former students and colleagues and people like that, and have Dan Byrne out to the Antelope Valley, and we would have a private house concert, and he would talk about songwriting, and sort of share his process and the story behind the songs. And I wrote about one of them for one of the columns I did in the paper, and Dan liked it, and it was pretty well received, and it was just great to be in that room and feel that sense of community that you were talking about, and to really see all these different people that knew you and were connected with you, and were connected to music and creativity coming together. And it's something that I hope that through talks like this, and these conversations, and hopefully in-person events coming up, that we can help bring some of that back, and help help grow that little increments at a time in the valley.
Yeah. He's, the thing about Dan is, I mean, I had been following his career for years, and then chance meetup on Highway 1.
Mm-hmm.
There he is in the line for hamburgers,
Yeah.
and my husband saw him first, and started singing one of his songs, and Dan was standing in front of us, and Dennis started singing one of his songs, and he turned around with this kind of look on his face like, what?
Yeah.
And we got to talking, and it came out that I'd taught songwriting, and he said, well, I've never taught a songwriting class, but I'm about to teach one. Could I use your students as guinea pigs? And I'm like, well, I don't have a budget to pay you or anything. He was living in Los Angeles at the time. He said, oh, I'll just come out if you'll let me teach your class. He ended up coming out to the songwriting class at ABC probably 5 times.
Wow.
And giving a workshop. Talk about generous. I was able to scrape together $100 for him for gas, but
Yeah.
but he had some really great techniques for songwriting himself too, and then just setting an example of what can be done. He's got this great. Have you ever listened to his radio station?
I have a little bit. I need to listen to it more often, but I've heard it.
I learned something from it every time I listen to it, because he puts together the whole playlist himself, and you can hear anything on that station from the Martin Luther King "I Had a Dream" speech to Muhammad Ali, "I'm the greatest" speeches, to like obscure singer-songwriters to famous ones. It's really a great tool just for music education. So, and that's just out there for free for anybody. And so that's another way that I just kind of, he was a mentor big time for me.
Yeah. I wanted to at least get that in there because it's a good example of how you shared, what you had, and just different connections, and trying to bring that ability to your songwriting students, and allowing them to have that opportunity was a pretty incredible thing. So anyway, I wanted to thank you again, Laura, for joining us today, a part of the Bridge Builders lecture series, and we thank you so much for not just sharing some of your insight on creativity with us today, but just your service to the artistic and music community of the Antelope Valley for so many years. We all appreciate you very much.
Thanks, Jesse, and likewise, I really appreciate what you're doing in terms of bridge building too.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So thank you for joining us, everybody. We will do another one of these at the end of August, and just make this a recurring monthly series. So please subscribe to the Palmdale Library page if you haven't already. If you would like to see somebody on this series that we haven't had yet, please leave a comment, send us a message, and we will try to work that out. And please keep in contact with the library about all of our exciting events coming up as the COVID restrictions are lifting. So thank you again to Robert Shoup for hosting this, and thank you to Jamie Lee Beck for recording. Have a great day, everybody.